right, welcome back everyone. Good to see you all here. If you don't have the headset on yet, make sure you set the headset on, so make sure to use those. If you can't hear me well, you should be able to hear me really well with those headsets. Are they working well? Amazing. All right, good afternoon. Good to see everyone. My name is Maiko Schaffrath. I'm the founder of Impact Hustlers. We're a global community for founders that solve social and environmental problems. And I'm also running the Greenhouse Accelerator at Imperial College in London, so working with lots of innovators. Today, I'm really excited to host a session with both innovators, but also activists that are fighting for an end to plastic and single-use plastic. And we'll not talk just about the importance of eliminating plastic, but also on maybe some of the discussions that we need to have between us about plastic. I'm German myself. I don't know, any Germans here? I mean, I grew up basically the first day after I was born, I was taught about recycling. You know, it's a religion in Germany. We're really good at recycling. But there's also, it was a rude awakening to actually realize how badly recycling actually works, for example. So we'll talk about that today. We'll talk about alternatives. We'll talk about microplastics. All of us are eating on average a credit card worth of plastic every week. So microplastic is a big topic, and I'm really excited to have some exciting speakers join me today. And first off, really excited to have Sean Sutherland, the founder of A Plastic Planet, give a keynote for us to set the scene about the topic. Over to you, Sean.
Great, thank you so much, Maiko. Good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to see you all. I've got a lot to go through, and I've got 18 minutes, so forgive me, first for not speaking any French, but secondly for going at speed. But hopefully these slides are going to help frame everything that we're going to talk about. So yes, my name is Sean Sutherland. I'm co-founder of A Plastic Planet and also an organization called Plastic Health Council and the global solutions platform of Plastic Free, hosted on plasticfree.com. I want to pull us back for a moment now where we don't think about plastic and we think about this. And I don't know if anybody has seen the images from the James Webb Telescope. Are you saying you can't hear me? Can anyone hear me? I'm afraid it's just you. Yeah, they picked you. So the James Webb Telescope is showing us these incredible images of where stars are born. But also what it shows us is just how unbelievably rare this little blue and green marble that hangs in the inky blackness really is. It shows us that this is the only planet, believe us, this is the only planet that can sustain life as we know it. And we know that it's in trouble. And then what happened many years ago, now we're talking about the butterfly effect of plastic, many years ago, 1907, a guy called Leo Baekeland invented a material called Bakelite. Some of you will remember things like telephones used to be made out of it. But it was the first material that man had made that was 100% synthetic molecules. Not a single molecule of Bakelite is actually found in nature. And what do we use it for? One of the first things that we used it for was this. This is actually a cigarette holder. Kind of ironic that people talk about plastic being the smoking of our generation. And here we are. The first thing that it was used for was something to help us smoke more. And then we used it for more stuff. We used it for all these plastic housewares. And then we thought it was a miracle that we could just use things once. We could make things so easily, so cheaply, that we could use them once and throw them away. Then we discovered we could even make clothing out of it. So we started to make this miracle called polyester, which now comprises 70% of all the clothes in the world. And then we just started to make more and more and more stuff. So much stuff that we ran out of store space, and we had to create the online store so that we could then develop even more opportunities to sell stuff. So these kind of huge global businesses can only exist because of plastic. And indeed, social media can only exist because of plastic. Their entire systems are built on this super cheap, disposable material that is toxic and lives forever. So we look back and we think, particularly in the last 50 years, we've built this extraordinary, this incredible growth economy. But the reality is, all we've ever really built is waste. We are the only species on the planet that creates waste. So I'm here really to give you a snapshot into why plastic is important, particularly when we are obsessed with carbon. Because we see plastic as the gateway to everything. And I've just covered some of it. Hyperconsumption. Imagine the carbon imprint, which is created by our hyperconsumption models now. But more than that, I'd love you to consider this, which we call our plastic polycule, which I know a Gen Z has quite a different reference for. But this we call the plastic polycule because I think it is very much the gateway to everything. You can drill so much of our polycrisis back and lay the blame at the foot of plastic. I'll go through just a couple of those. Of course, carbon. Plastic is solid climate crisis. It is indeed the canary in the coal mine that has alerted us. And when you're looking at the amount of carbon that the plastics industry produce, it is the 5th biggest emitter as a country of greenhouse gases. So do not believe that myth that plastic helps us with carbon. And then I want to talk about the global health crisis, because of course we should care about the environmental damage plastic has caused. But what we really care about is ourselves. And we're so used to seeing plastic, it's become this omnipresent material that's everywhere in our lives. And so it's very easy for us to forget that it is not on the periodic table. This is not like aluminium or cobalt or copper. It is not an element in itself. No, it is a mixture of chemicals, and many of them are toxic, and many of them are toxic to human health, particularly to our children. We use 16,000 chemicals to make plastic. The scientists believe it's many more than that, but this 16,000 are the ones that we even know the names of. Only 4,000 of those have been tested for human health impact. And of almost all of those are found on the European Register for Chemicals for Extreme Concern. Here's just a small snapshot of where we're finding some of those chemicals in the human body. We're finding already in unborn babies' brains. We have pre-polluted our children. We know that it's in breast milk. It's in placenta. And it's having a huge impact with these endocrine disrupting chemicals on fertility. Male fertility is down 53%. The scientists believe by 2047, men will not be able to reproduce in the old-fashioned way. We need to be a little bit more concerned about what we are doing with our addiction to plastic. And then, of course, biodiversity loss and the impact that we're having on every other living thing on the planet. We've definitely pushed nature way too far. Plastic is an insult to nature. We've already, in the last 100 years, lost 90% of the large fish in our ocean. In 50 years, and this is a European stat, not even a global stat, 80% of the winged insects in our skies have gone. We all know the importance of the hierarchy, just the humble bumblebee, how important it is. We've lost 50% of the phytoplankton and Arctic krill in our waters, and that's only in 70 years. This is the very ecosystem of life on planet Earth as we know it, is being destroyed by our addiction to these very easy, simple, cheap, throwaway items. So what do we need to do? How do we need to use plastic as the gateway for this extraordinary polycrisis that we live in? What we do at A Plastic Planet is this very simple thing. Everything that we do at A Plastic Planet has to answer this. We need to ignite and inspire the world to turn off the plastic tap. We never talk about recycling. We're not involved in beach cleans, none of those things. It's all about working with governments and industry. And we do that in two ways that I refer to as the cattle prod and the lightning rod. So we need a little bit of shock and awe. We need to wake industry and governments up. They need to protect us. And then we need the lightning rod, which for myself as an entrepreneur is where I get excited. And that lightning rod is innovation. The cattle prod for industry is going to be risk. And pretty clearly, it's going to be the risk to human health and the responsibility of industry and governments to do something about it. It's starting to happen already. Lawsuits are happening. Late last year, the Attorney General of California stood up and said, we are suing the plastics industry, Exxon, the biggest polymer manufacturer. We are suing them for the decades of lies and deceits around plastic and recycling, and the bullshit that we have been fed that we could just recycle our way out of this when we clearly can't. But that's not the only lawsuit. There are 60 lawsuits happening in the last 10 years alone. So the rule of law to protect us is going to be a brutal force that we urgently need in the world of plastic. Because law will lead to policy. And of course, we need more policy. We know that voluntary isn't working. There is no industry that didn't come out 7 years ago with some kind of plastic pledge or pact or promise. None of them are hitting their goals. There is the UN Global Plastics Treaty. Some of you may know about that. That is, we hope, what might be the final negotiating session is happening in August this year. Personally, I think, you know, it's up shit creek, definitely without a paddle. It's massively impacted by the 193 fossil fuel lobbyists that turn up at every negotiations, trying to delay and distract from creating a treaty that has teeth that will protect us. One of the things that we did is we got all the health scientists together in our Plastic Health Council, and we actually produced a health scientist global plastic treaty. If the delegates representing us, all the countries that we live in the UN, if they truly wanted to listen to the scientists, then here you are. Here's the treaty that the health scientists would want to happen to protect us. Because what we know is that when we have laws, taxation, fiscal policy, it has an incredible impact on business, because it gives them certainty. And it's only when business has certainty will they wean themselves off this incredible but toxic and indestructible material and change their very systems and their supply chains and truly innovate and properly invest in that innovation. So when you think of plastic as the center of this polycule, the center of our polycrisis, then think of it maybe not as a crisis, but as a gift. It is that canary in the coal mine. It is allowing us that defibrillator moment to wake us up to change not just the material, but the system. And I'm going to move on to a few of the solutions that I think are really exciting, because it's very easy to talk about the problem. We all know about the problem, perhaps not the scale of it, but what is exciting is, what is our future going to look like? And the first thing that plastic has invented and really enabled is single use. Being able to use something once and throw it in a bin, thinking that somebody's magically dealing with it. So this is our shopping reality right now. Aisle after aisle of plastic bottles that you use once and you put in a bin, thinking that's the most that you can do. Imagine if it just looked like this. Imagine if this is just a crude mock-up, but imagine if we were using standardized componentry across competitive brands and retailers that went into a system that didn't have to just be recycled, but was washed and then reused. Because most of the things that we use, we don't destroy them in use, but we have to put them back into a very carbon-intensive recycling system. So Reposit is one of the projects that we're involved in that is creating this collaborative, returnable system. So this is not about refill. This is, I buy something, it's already filled, and I can take it back as an empty vessel, and I get rewarded for doing that, and then it's washed and returned. And the other thing that we need to really explore is, what is true circularity? And here we are at Change Now, and there's a lot of talk about circularity. And this illustration that came out some 10 years ago really started to indicate, you know, we're in the linear, we need to get to the recycling economy. And eventually we start talking about the circular economy. But for us, this is flawed. And you will all see why straight away, because there's still a bin. And when you think of the billions of tons of stuff that we make, that bin is huge. And the reason that there's still a bin is how we treat materials. We take natural resources from Mother Nature, we toxify them, we treat them, let's look at leather, we put chromium and heavy metals and toxic dyes, so that when it goes back to nature, that everything eventually does, including ourselves, it goes back as a poison. So imagine that our circular economy learnt from the mother herself. There is only one circle that we need to think about, and it's called nature. And there is nothing toxic in nature. There is no waste in nature. Everything becomes the nutrient for the next stage of growth. So imagine if we could do the same. We could borrow those natural resources. We could make things with them that are useful for us today. And then we could ensure that they were toxin-free so that they'd go back to nature without any harm. That's the circle that we need to get to. Because if we don't regenerate nature, then we will not have a livable planet, and that's what everybody here is talking about. Sustainability is not enough. It has to be about regeneration. And the innovation that we will see of new materials, particularly with biotechnology and the use of AI, is going to fundamentally change everything. This is one of the companies that we love working with. They're called NFW, and they have created an entire system that is based on plants. They're making things like sneakers. We make 60 billion sneakers every single year, 60 billion. And largely they're made out of plastic, and of course they're unrecyclable. This is an edible sneaker. This is something that can be ground up and it can go back into the earth as a nutrient. This is the kind of technology that we need. They're working with many other different businesses, replacing plastic. Another one is Shellworks, using fermented microbes to create materials that look and feel a bit like plastic, but are not plastic, and they don't have that level of toxicity. And then when they are done, they will return to the earth safely. Sparxel, they're here actually, but Sparxel, really exciting company out of Cambridge, looking at the fact that nearly every one of our pigments, our dyes that we use, is using fossil fuels. So they're a form of plastic in many ways. And they went back to nature and they decided, what could we use instead? Because nature has all these abundant colors. And then they realized that actually cellulose, if you shatter it and you create these prisms, you can create fossil fuel textile dyes. And beyond even the textile dyes, you can make sequins. You can also replace mica in your beauty products. And finally, a company called Envico, the new bottle company that we've been working with, who are using the most abundant material on planet Earth, and that is cellulose. And they're using that for this particular challenge. They're the company that took Apple, the technology company, out of plastic packaging, and they've taken all that demanding aesthetic, and they're applying that technology to now replace some of the 600 billion plastic bottles that we pump out every single year, goes halfway to the sun. So they're using renewable, regenerative, locally sourced cellulosic fiber in order to make a bottle that will go back to Earth safely. This is a really simple philosophy from one of our partners. And whenever you're looking at new materials, this is a great question to ask. Does it start well? Does it stay clean? And will it end well? Because you know that it can't end well if it didn't start well. And that's why plastic will never, ever be circular. And it can't stay clean if it doesn't start well. So all of those things take you into this wonderful loop of keeping a nutrient-based material throughout. I think we're very fatalistic. We think we have no power. We think that the future is inevitable. And I really want to push back against that and remind you, we created the present. We created the future that we're living today. I believe that we can create another future. I think plastic can be the extraordinary gateway to do that. And we know that when you bring, and many organizations here at Change Now feature this, business, creativity, and science, when you bring them together, you can have the greatest accelerators of change ever. Never has an economist or a banker fundamentally changed the way we live. It is the maverick thinkers, and they're the ones that we need right now. But we need to move faster. Right now, we are still doing reports after reports, yet another McKinsey thing, another report from Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Enough. Now it's about action, so we need to move to action tanks now. And I implore you all, when you're listening to this next panel, stop thinking of plastic as a material. Plastic is the center of the polycrisis that broke the system where we lived in harmony with nature on so many different levels. So my final provocation is, how could we use this as the gateway to solving so much else in biodiversity, in our hyper-consumptive models, in the billions of tons of waste, in the carbon impact that we have. All of these things really come back to the invention of plastic. So now I have told you, given you this little insight into the plastic crisis, and before I hand over to Maiko, I want to give you one question. Please raise your hands. How many people here believe that recycling plastic is going to be the answer to save us? Very good. Not a single hand. Then why is that all we talk about? And why do we still do it? Why are we complicit in the problem? Because we think that putting it in the right bin is all we can do as citizens. So I want a global uprising to say plastic recycling is bullshit. We need to push back against it. It is the narrative, the placebo pill, the chimera that has been sold to us by the fossil fuel industry in order to continue pumping it out of the tap. Plastic production is forecast to treble within the next 20 years. So we have not seen anything yet. Right now, you have 7 grams of plastic in your brain, and so do your children. When is enough enough? Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So if recycling isn't going to save us, let's have a discussion on what could save us. And I'm really excited to have innovators on stage and activists on stage joining us now. So with that, I'm asking my panelists to join me on stage. And I'll do a quick intro and we'll have a discussion on some tangible solutions. So welcome on stage. So we've got Jeannette Morath, the founder of reCIRCLE, which is replacing single-use plastics, specifically in the food sector, in corporate canteens, but also in restaurants with those reusable containers. So welcome, thanks on stage, welcome. Then we got Alexander from Guppyfriend. I talked about the microplastics. Guppyfriend is offering solutions to fight microplastics, specifically with filters, for example, that you can install at home to make sure that microplastics aren't released into the environment. And then excited to have Rosalie Mann as well on stage, the founder and CEO of No More Plastic Foundation, which is campaigning for an end to plastic. So excited to have you on as well. All right, let's get going. So first of all, we already heard Sean's keynote on recycling isn't the solution, plastic isn't the solution. Now, I want to figure out do we have one shared goal here? And how can we balance that with some level of pragmatism as well to do what we can? So do we have a shared goal to eliminate plastic completely? Or should we be focusing on single-use plastics first? Who wants to start on that? I know obviously you're doing different solutions. I just want to hear a little bit about your philosophies on eliminating plastics, single-use plastics, or what's your solution? So start with you, Jeannette.
So I'll probably start because we fight plastic with plastic. We have created reusable packagings for food and beverage. It's a very high quality material, but 70% it's petroplast. For us, the solution must be mixed. It shouldn't be a replacement of material. It should be a system change, and that's what we are doing with our system. People have a new habit. They have a new behavior. They reuse packaging, and because of the higher quality, the whole loop can be closed with also a good recycling process and good materials. We always say, if you put good things in, good things comes out.
Got it. Now, Alexander, you're offering solutions to fight microplastics. You could say that you're a bit further downstream, very pragmatic, fighting the actual pollution of microplastics.
Yeah, it's actually we try to stop microplastic pollution at home, at industries and sports on the road. And that comes because we had a key moment at the UN and the OECD. If you witnessed firsthand how long it takes if 190 plus countries even come up with a common agreement about a definition of a problem, you know that there's a long way to go until there's a problem and there's a common goal that we're all shooting to. That's why we decided, okay, let's focus on what we are good at, finding eco-solutions that stop the problem and that explain the problem more or less. Yeah, and I mean, I'm just saying that legal or laws take a long time. However, they're going to be one important mosaic in the whole game. But it's, of course, there's a bunch of solutions. We have to stop upstream, the upstream plastic, and there are many more. So,
got it. Rosalie, over to you.
For eliminate plastic or single-use plastic
you're focused
only?
on eliminating plastic,
Yeah,
right? That's your goal.
I think we have to wake up, all of us, because it's not the plastic the problem, it's us. We are addicted about this material. We think it's really necessary, but the truth is that there are two sectors represent more of 50% of the production right now. Just two sectors, no more, just two. Packaging and textile. And textile is not single-use plastic. So single-use plastic is a false debate. The real thing is that these two sectors, because it's absolutely possible to replace plastic in these two industries. We can do it. We just opened a pop-up store at the Printemps Haussmann, and to present different solutions already exist in the market, because it's possible to use different things without plastic. We have algae, glasses, mycelium. There are so many different solutions already exist on this. And for example, for textile, we will have sneakers without plastic, 100% of wool, and with rubber. And it's possible, and it's absolutely the same like this, for example, but it's not creating microplastic who goes into our bodies. Right now, all our babies, all the babies born pre-polluted by microplastics, and we have all microplastic in our bodies, so we have to wake up.
What does waking up looking like, and maybe to the other panelists, from your perspective, what is the tangible things that are actually solutions? Because if the solutions are around, why are we still swimming in plastic?
I mean, it comes back to your first question. Are we shooting on the common goal? Since we all know what it does to the climate crisis, we don't know what it does to our health, to biodiversity loss, and we know that this leads to extinction of humanity if we continue like that. Yet there is hardly any action seen in the market. This might be an exception here, but I mean, you mentioned two areas, but there's of course, there's infrastructure that uses a lot of plastic, and there are many more industries, even though I agree that we should start with the major culprits of plastic pollution. But the question is really fair. We haven't acted yet, and we know that since a long time what's happening to us and that it's poisoning us. And what actually needs to happen before we shoot on a common goal to stop it? Yeah, we had a discussion previous to this panel discussion where somebody said, okay, maybe we need a Trump moment, a plastic Trump, who just said it's all forbidden, and we stop it right away. So there's some radical ideas, but there's no definite answer on that question. It's just that we can't nourish the existing systems and keep continuing producing plastic, and then at the end we are, it's not good for us. We know that already now. So how do we actually manage legislation and all the other things, and how do we get it into the right direction one by one? That's a big question, and there is no easy answer.
Jeannette, how is it from your perspective? What's kind of stopping us actually adopting solutions at scale?
Maybe I can tell you the story how we designed this bowl, because I did a material research and I tested not only the material but also the behavior and the life cycle analysis. So everything we do, it's science-based. And plastic was the most sustainable one, because you can use it many times if you use a good plastic that's not poisoning. So that's why we chose plastic. But I mean, this doesn't mean that we will not replace it one day when there is another good material which would work. And what we wanted to do was a system change, as I said before, not just a material change. Because if we continue producing things for just 5 minutes of lifetime, like a coffee cup in paper, for example, that are used here as well, then we will still drown in single-use packaging. So that's what I wanted to change.
You wanted to jump in on that? No? Yeah.
No, for me, that is not true for us. For us, we have to change the mentality about the plastic recycling, about the plastic reusing, because plastic recycling is not the solution at all. It's more toxic. Plastic is a toxic material. So when you reuse it or recycling, it's still toxic, it's still poisonous, and still generate and create microplastic. We breathe microplastic right now. We have all the studies already exist. We have a plastic treaty, actually, but we are 50 years late. We know all of that about 50 years ago. So we have to wake up. People, please wake up. It's not possible to continue like that. It's possible for this kind of thing is nice, but it's plastic, it's still plastic issue from the petrochemical industry, and it's not a solution. It's poisonous. It's poison your children, the next generation, etc. We have to replace this. It's possible. It's possible. It is not an illusion or an utopia, or I don't know what you think about it.
Yet we have to see reality. I mean, there are a couple of players. There are politicians, there is the finance industry, there are the companies, and there are the end users, and that's basically us. And I don't see anybody wearing any sneakers that's not made out of plastic or that is, let alone being recyclable. I see everybody drinking out of a recyclable cup here. So there is a hard way to go, and we have to, even though, I mean, what can we do? It's about education, telling people what does it do to your health, which is getting increasingly difficult in these times, because if you have a study how bad it is for your health, you have 2 studies that claim the opposite. So you just have to make up your own mind. Do I want to be surrounded by plastic or don't? And what are the options? What can I do? What are the brands that I need to shop? What are the questions that I need to ask those brands in order to change? Because that's the power that we have. To ask, why aren't you, how's your sourcing strategy? I don't get your design strategy. You use composite materials that can never be put back into a cycle. There are tools to stop microplastic. You don't have to buy a textile that's made out of polyester. But if you do, then use a product, a bag that we produce, by the way, just to stop it, and question your washing behavior. Everybody knows how to wash silk or wool. Hardly anybody knows how to wash plastic. Look at the detergent that you have, and statistically, 99% of all the people sitting here have a detergent that contains not only palm oil, not only chemicals that travel the world, but also a lot of plastic, even though when they're microplastic free. And here's the problem about legislation. Microplastic per definition is always a solid particle. What are the companies doing? They're replacing the solid parts by liquid polymers, so plastic again. So it's really hard to be ahead of the game from companies, but that's our responsibility, to question things, to ask things, to do the learning, to get into the topic and understand things, and then take the right decisions for us, for the planet, for our health. I think that is the most powerful tool that we own.
And another thing is, you kind of have to do what you can do now. Maybe the solution is not perfect. Maybe the material we use is not perfect. But with this material, we have already saved almost 100 million single-use packaging since we started, which could also end up partly in the ocean and get microplastic. And not only that, also like harm wildlife, turtles and stuff, you know. So I think we should start doing what we can now, because it's 12:05, instead of waiting for the perfect solution.
But we can do right now.
Yeah,
there is so many solutions represented here.
Well, let's talk about
years.
that. Let's talk about that, right? Because we're all at change now. I think to a large degree we agree on a lot of things, at least directionally, even if we have slightly different approaches. We agree on a lot of things. I've been to Change Now since, I think, 2018, right? It's inspiring every year to come back and hear about solutions. And Sean was right. There is a lot of solutions. Like, I work with startups day to day. I see so many solutions. But to challenge ourselves is the incentives are still not aligned, right? Plastics is still very cheap to use if
Yes,
you obviously
but
don't
why
account
not?
for the
Why?
environmental effects, because that's the way the system is designed. They're still perceived as a very convenient option. So are we just like making ourselves feel better by saying, oh, wake up and let's reduce single-use plastic, if we don't actually make plastic alternatives cheaper and more convenient
Yes.
to use than plastic? Isn't
Absolutely.
that the root
Yes.
cause? Isn't that something that we need to address?
Yes, but why? Why? Because we decide us. We would like to change the system. We put everything, we applaud recycling plastic. When we give a prize to society who make recycling plastic, we like when you see something on Instagram, on LinkedIn with recycling plastic. So we're creating what? We're creating that governments, banks, put all the investments, billion of dollars about where? Reusing plastic, recycling plastic, and not in the real solution. The solution who are there. They are not investment. They are not million dollars investment on this. They are just little investments, step by step. We have time, it's okay, fine, blah, blah, blah. It's just blah, blah, blah. That's all. We have to wake up. Stop to like recycling plastic. Stop to like when you see someone to say reusing plastic is good. It's not good. It's poisonous. It's poison the next generation. It's poison my kids.
We
Wake
got that
up.
point. We
Sorry,
got the
but
wake up
I'm
point. Makes,
so tired
makes a lot
to
of
make
sense.
all the
I think
time the same
the
things.
point I wanted to challenge us on is if it was cheaper for corporates to adopt non-plastic solution, if it was more convenient for consumers, there may be other reasons that even people that don't go to Change Now will opt for non-plastic solutions. Even people that don't listen to you, don't listen to us here on stage. How can we get people on board that are not sitting here in the audience, that are not, that, you know, are thinking about 10 other problems, but not plastics? How can we get them on board with that? Because I think we've been campaigning for a long time, but we
don't have time. We don't have time.
Right. So the question is there something else needed that we haven't been doing so far on creating solutions? Jeannette, maybe on that.
So that solutions are adopted by a large public. They need to be convenient. So convenience is key. They need to be cost effective, and they need to be easy to adopt. And if something is too difficult, even we know it's better for us, people will not do it. That's why sometimes you have to start doing something before you can make it perfect.
I mean, we have chosen a path because we were asking the same questions. How do we actually crossing the chasm to the mass market? Because talking to the already, or the ones who knows, how do we do that? And we decided to work with sport clubs, with professional sports clubs as first, because we said, okay, it's role models. If you have a role model as a kid, you listen to them more closely than to your own parents. So we try to get like the influencers, and especially in sport, because there's lots of emotions, we try to get them behind the idea. And it's still, I'm totally with you. We have to raise the voice. Just to give you an example, which sticks to in the plastics area, there was this European soccer championship last year in Germany. And in Berlin, they had a huge plastic carpet, artificial turf, in front of the Brandenburger Gate. It's like a green park, and they just put tons of plastic on it. And it got like flown everywhere. So they created the biggest microplastic area in the whole country. But what happened? Rather than that, people said, oh, that's how can you actually do that? There are a few. The media were celebrating it. Macron was visiting, and he was standing on the carpet and say, hey, that's cool. It's not cool. And nobody's saying that. The opposite is happening. They even get awarded for the eco-concept of a deposit whatever shit that should be normal. And that's where where I totally agree with you, and where we have to raise our voice. They can't just do it. And these are the ones that we rely on to do the legislation. So let's rather rely on ourselves, and to get all the others, just tell 10 people about 5 biggest innovations that you see here that they can use right away. That's where you can. That's your part in the game, besides what you do every day.
So, what I want to learn from you is, do you think in the end we need to focus a lot on putting pressure on policymakers? Should that be like a big focus? Obviously, that's part of your work as well. Or is that our only hope, to basically advocate for plastic bans? Or is there other ways to make it happen, to actually just create a reality through innovative solutions? Or is it both?
So I think we need both. But system change wins, because usually also legislation runs after the state of the art, and then you have a good law. Now we have the packaging and packaging waste regulation in Europe, and there is still a lot of questions open, and it blocked a lot of people who wanted to adopt the solution, because now they wait for the law. So, but if you have a good system and that's running and that's impactful, then people will use it if there is a law or not. I started my initiative in Switzerland in 2016, and there was no law. It was paradise, because we just had people joining because they wanted to change something, not because they had to change something, which makes a big difference.
I guess, Alexander, it's the same for you, right? Your customers are buying your solution. They're not forced to buy your solution, right?
Yeah, but I think maybe we work with incentives to get a better behavior. But of course, it needs to be on all the levels: customer, company, finance, politicians. But it takes a long time until politicians react and until you really have the laws. So in the meantime, and I mentioned that again, this plastic Trump, because I like that picture, your metaphor so much. Somebody was just saying this is allowed and this isn't, and then for the good. But it's not going to happen. So it's on us. It's our responsibility to change things, and we need it, of course, on all levels.
As we wrap up this session, I want to hear one really positive thing. Again, I introduced the session as, I'm German, I was told recycling is the solution. Everybody can recycle, do that. What's one thing, if it's not recycling, what is it one thing that everybody can do, either through their career, through their work, or in their daily behavior outside of not using plastics? What's the kind of biggest impact we can have to be part of the change?
Well, just eliminate the need for disposables, for single-use packaging.
Rethink everything, even thinking. I mean, just question yourself how often do you touch plastic, and then make up the math, what it does to your body, and then you come up with the conclusion yourself, I guess.
Stop to likes and applause reuse and recycling plastic, because if we will do that, you are responsible, because banks and politics invest in this kind of solution, not because it works, because it's popular. That's all. Thank you.
All right, I think we saw the range of approaches. I think what I like about Change Now is that we have like such a broad range of pragmatic approaches. So I'm complimenting each of you for the pragmatic work that you're putting in day to day on that, both on the innovation side, on the policy and campaigning side. So thank you so much for the three of you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Maiko.
One of my biggest concerns very often at Change Now is that we all agree on everything and we just have a cushy, nice time. But I think you could really see some interesting, different approaches to the problem. Next up, I'm really excited to be joined by Melati from YOUTHTOPIA. So I'll get Melati to join us on stage. Welcome.
Oh, hello.
Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It was a little bit difficult to hear everyone, but I only got the headsets at the halfway through. So,
all right.
But I'm excited to be here today.
Perfect. Good to have you. Good to have you. So you actually became an activist with 10 years old.
Yes.
Together with your sister in Bali, when you were campaigning and started an organization that advocated for stopping plastic bags.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that journey and then how you got to run Youthtopia, and then we'll jump straight into the problem and
Yeah, for
how
sure.
young people can be part of the solution.
Of course. And hello, everybody. My name is Melati. I'm 24 years old. I introduce myself always as a full-time change maker. But as you heard, my journey started a very, very, very long time ago. More than half of my life has been dedicated to this fight against plastic pollution, where growing up on the island of Bali, it was simple. When we saw the problem, we thought, what are we going to do about it? And sometimes life can be that simple. My sister and I thought enough is enough. What are we going to do about it? And so without a business plan, without a big budget or a marketing strategy, but with a very clear vision, we started our first organization called Bye Bye Plastic Bags. And the mission in the name, nice and simple, we wanted our home of Bali to be plastic bag free. And we started building a movement that became much bigger than Two Sisters on the island, with a collaboration across many different industry leaders, many different organizations, and together with all of this momentum that we were building collectively on the island, in 2019 an actual ban on plastic bags, straws and styrofoam finally came into place. So yes, we showed that people power can be more powerful than the people in power. And so yeah, now after years of doing that, I started Youthtopia, which is more on youth empowerment and peer-to-peer education, and I'll talk a little bit about that later.
Yeah, maybe let's start with your early journey and then transition over to Youthtopia. What do you think was kind of the biggest factor of actually bringing about that change when you first became an activist? Is it just about getting the biggest possible group to support you? What was like the thing that really turned and gave you the traction to have the impact that you had?
So when we started, it was 2013, and let me be very clear with the first thing. Saying no to plastic bags is nothing new and nothing special. Many, many organizations and people all around the world have been campaigning for this message years before us. What we had on our advantage were two things. One, timing. People were fed up with the plastic pollution. They saw it every day as well, and they were fed up with it. They thought as well, what are we going to do about it? So there was this momentum, there was this time that was building, and we had that to our advantage. The other aspect was that we were 10 and 12 years old, a bunch of kids on the island standing up and saying, this is the change we want, and if we can do it, you can do it too. So I think that was two very powerful advantages that we had, but also the recognition that we couldn't do it alone. So what we had established in our organization very early on was a deep sense of collaboration. And not only with the people who agree with you, not only the other organizers and the other campaigners who've envisioned the same type of change, but we also worked with the hotel industry. We also worked with our local politicians. We worked and sat hours after school with our local mayors and our local organizers and tried to build a narrative that was much bigger than one organization or one solution to come together for this change. And I think that that was really what helped build the momentum that led to this ban on plastic bags on the island.
Amazing. Let's talk about Youthtopia, because with Youthtopia, your mission really is educating the next generation of young innovators, and you're really helping them learn on how to have an impact. So I'd love to understand your approach to that, because activism and climate, activism and plastics has been around for decades and decades. And we find ourselves this year especially, or the last couple of years, kind of moving opposite directions, probably not the direction that all of us will want to move in. If we look at what's happening globally, if we're looking at what's happening in the US, is there anything that we need to change, like us here at Change Now, or that you're teaching the activists that you're working with at Youthtopia, that we need to change in our approach? Because we've been campaigning for long. Yes, there has been successes, a lot, but we're still like so far away from where we want to go, right?
Okay, there's a lot that I want to unpack here.
Huge question.
Yeah, a couple of things that come to mind. The first thing is I learned very quickly as well, the more focused your end goal is, the easier it is to build momentum, the easier it is to invite people into the movement. So what is your call to action as an organization, as an individual? We were so clear with Bye Bye Plastic Bags. And I think that that clarity allowed us to walk into rooms and negotiate with our local politicians, mobilize and get get more partners involved and also encourage more team members and other young people to join the team. So a clear goal, because the second aspect here is that we have to remember we cannot be everything to everyone. And that's also not the point. Every single person in this room has their own unique skills and their own unique strengths. How can we look collectively at what needs to be done and fill the gaps that are not filled? A business cannot do what a young change maker is doing. A young change maker cannot do what an investor needs to be doing. And on it goes. So I think really the shift or the change that we can all bring back home is the power that we have as individuals, contributing it back to the collective movement that we need. So this is something that, as a young founder, having started Bye Bye Plastic Bags and now also building YOUTHTOPIA, is something I'm so incredibly proud but also grateful for, this ecosystem of change makers where we all understand a very big job needs to be done, and we all arrive there in different ways. So it's about creating narratives where we feel the invitation to do that, to be that best person and that best change maker we can be.
Can you share any examples from your work with YOUTHTOPIA on change makers that have had a tremendous impact on plastics and like how they went about it?
Yeah, so first of all, what is YOUTHTOPIA? After 10 years of working on Bye Bye Plastic Bags and traveling around the world, sharing the story of what me and my sister were able to achieve at 10 and 12 years old, we always got one question, no matter where we were, if it was in a classroom in Tokyo or in New York City or in the Maluku Islands in Indonesia. And that one question was always the same. It was, Melati, how can I create change? Where do I start? And so YOUTHTOPIA is a learning platform which currently has 5,000 students and over 300 programs, all for free, created by young change makers for young change makers. So we really lean into this peer-to-peer education where we learn from each other's experiences, what went right, what went wrong, what could have gone better, through master classes, workshops, and all of that. I'd highly recommend and invite you all to check out the platform. And what I love the most about it is the different role models, and I heard in the conversation when I was tuning in on my headsets, the power of role models, right? We cannot become it if we do not see it. And when we talk about raising a generation of change makers, who are the change makers that we know or that we see? We most likely all know Greta Thunberg, or before there was a lovely change maker, Shea Bastida. There are a couple more change makers here. I know Inez, I know Sian is here as well. All of these different role models are so important because then students and young people around us can look up and say, okay, that's my strength as well, or I resonate and relate to the most with this change maker or that change maker. And in terms of examples, Fionn, for example, who is matching me in my jacket, but in a different color, we're twinning, is an incredible innovator, chemist, inventing a device that magnets microplastic. I'm sorry, you're going to have to do a better job at pitching yourself, my dear. But, you know, there's so many different ways of how young people are tackling. Amy Meek, I think, was at Another Change Now, campaigning against plastic bags and plastic pollution in general as well in the UK. So there are many different ways of how young people are approaching this in many different parts of the world.
Do you think we need to do a better job building alliances between innovators, activists, people in policy? You know, Change Now is such a great opportunity because a lot of these people from different backgrounds are here. What is kind of the one thing that you think we do need to change to kind of accelerate the speed of change?
I would love to see more intergenerational collaborations taking place, and I'm getting a lot of nods in the audience as well, because I think this is something where we'll see more accelerated solutions. But how do we establish these intergenerational collaborations where we get these big businesses and CEOs who are in the decision-making rooms to connect with young people who are full of ideas but maybe lack resources? First and foremost, that meaningful collaboration outside of a press conference, outside of the big headlines in the media, has to first be established. And in my new book, Change Starts Now, I have an entire chapter on this, where we dive deeper on how to establish those collaborations. But the reason why I say that this is something that I'd like to see more of is because I think far too often we're stuck in our ways of doing it and oftentimes operate in our separate silos. And one of the biggest frustrations I have working with many of these different levels of society is the frustration from young people not knowing where to go to find the resources, and then these big businesses or these leaders in positions of powers not having the inspiration or not finding the solutions that are so clearly here. So it's like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And I think building bridges through more of those intergenerational collaborations is a must.
How much is it about agency as well? I think very often you hear about young people feeling like they don't have as much agency. They're growing up in a world that's been designed by older generations that doesn't quite serve them, where they use social media platforms that have been designed to make you addicted, use plastic products, it's like surrounded by all this stuff that you didn't create. How do you feel can we take more young people on the journey from feeling like they don't have agency to then becoming change makers? I'm sure you work with a lot of people that are kind of naturally inclined to be change makers, but do you feel like there's a need for like more of a broader movement of inspiring people that feel like they have a lack of agency, but they could actually take charge of the situation?
I mean, great question. And I'm going to ask a question to all of you. How many of you say, yes, I am a change maker? Okay, a couple hands go up, but I do this, I also did this in my speech earlier this morning. The reason why I asked this question is because essentially every single hand should be up, right? So what needs to happen here? How do we move and activate this sense of agency? First and foremost, it's a change in definition of what it takes to be a change maker. Because this movement of change needs everyone. What is your strength? Are you a writer? Are you really great at research? Are you a connector? Are you an investor? Are you someone who can pick up the guitar and write a wonderful song, right? All of these different skills contribute back to being a change maker. And when we work with YOUTHTOPIA and go into schools and classrooms, oftentimes I'm at conferences where speakers will tell actually this really did happen, where at one conference, one of the speakers was asking the children to repeat after them and say, okay, to be a real leader, you have to be the king of the jungle. So be a lion and don't be a sheep. So this kid of 300 people were saying, be a lion, don't be a sheep. Be a lion, don't be a sheep. Because that's what leadership looks like. But again, a shift in a narrative. What if you aren't a lion? And what if you don't want to be a sheep, but you want to be a zebra or a butterfly? Great. A healthy, biodiverse ecosystem also has all of these different animals. And so it's a nice little story of what actually needs to be reflected in the human world and how we forgot to celebrate all the different strengths and skills that we each need. So it's about breaking down the definition of what it means to be a change maker, what it means to be a leader. You don't have to be a founder, you don't have to be great at public speaking if that's not what and how you want to contribute back to the movement. So I think it's about reconstructing this invitation to being part of the movement and making it more accessible, more relatable by providing different change makers, role models who are actively doing it. And then the first step is just getting started, because it's a long journey ahead and you learn as you go. Trust me, I've been doing this for a very long time, from 12 years old all the way through to 24.
What is the kind of biggest lesson that people in power right now can learn from young change makers? And maybe vice versa as well.
Okay.
What change makers can learn to actually get into positions of power to change.
Well, actually, I'm going to quote an interview that I heard recently of an entrepreneur that was asked a question of, like, what's the biggest lie you've been told? And this entrepreneur begins answering the question of the journalist, and he goes, well, it's not that simple. And the journalist goes, no, but I just want to know what's, the biggest lie that you've been told. And the guy says, no, that's the biggest lie. It's not that simple. It is. And I think the power of young people, especially in this rooms, is breaking it down, where sometimes world leaders are so consumed by which text and which numbers and how the data needs to be translated that we forget how simple it is when we walk on the beach and we see plastic pollution. We know that that's wrong, that we don't want that. And so I think young people serve that as a fresh reminder, as a stark reminder. And vice versa, I think that we can also learn that there's a lot of experience and that there's a lot of resources, and it does, change can happen. Dreams do come true. So I think when we find role models from older generations, it's really important to hold on to that, because Otherwise, we end up in the loss of hope, which I believe was also a conversation topic in the last section.
Well, let's double click on that, right? What needs to happen for us to inspire more hope? Because at the moment, it seems like a lot of people I talk to are losing hope, and to some degree are resigning to some degree, or it's a difficult environment out there to be an activist, difficult environment in a corporate world to make the case for sustainable solutions. I don't know how many of you are working in large corporates trying to advocate for solutions. It's difficult, right? So what is it that gives you hope and that should give everybody hope here in the audience?
I think a challenge of mine that I make sure to keep every week is to reach out to at least 3 change makers within either the YOUTHTOPIA network or in my friend circle, and having a conversation of 20 minutes just to hear how and what they are up to. I think these grounding conversations, it can seem so simple, but again, never underestimate the power of a conversation. When you learn and put yourself in a position where you have access to these stories, suddenly the change that has to happen or the work that still needs to be done doesn't seem so far away anymore, but instead is grounded in real life examples and real life stories. And I think this is really important because there's an exercise of imagination that needs to happen, just like how we take care of our physical body. Oftentimes you hear, you know, did you go to the gym? Did you drink enough water? What did you eat today? You know, all of these physical elements of how we take care of our physical body also has to happen with our mind and our imagination. Why? Because if we cannot see it, if we cannot dream it, if we don't know what the future tastes like, feels like, how can we ever work towards it? And I think we start planting those seeds from conversations with people around us and in our networks. So having access to inspiration is the first step of how you can keep that going.
I mean, you're definitely a big part of that, and Change Now is a big part of that. And people should definitely check out your book as well, which is a big part of that as well.
It's in the bookstore.
So quick plug for the book, maybe?
It's called Change Starts Now, and it has 100 lessons from everything I learned from 12 years old to 24. And I go a little bit in a reflective storytelling of what was going on in my 12-year-old brain, the frustrations. You hear some really, really cringy poetry that we love at 13 years old. When I first left the government meeting and change still didn't happen, but what I went through to keep on going and going and going, all the way through tips on intergenerational collaboration. There's a list at the end of the book of 100 other young change makers and that you can continue learning from. So yeah, it's my first book, 4 months officially a published author, and it's been absolutely amazing. But I learn every day, and I hope that yeah, this is also just the beginning of so much more to come.
Thank you, Melati, for joining us. Thanks for all of our panelists and Sean earlier for joining us. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for turning up as well. What I would like you to take away from this today is think about one risk that you can take in your personal or professional life to, if you have influence in a corporate, if you have influence in a government, if you have influence in any sort of organization, take one risk on a solution, right? On either implementing a new solution, on maybe starting a new organization that brings about a solution, on trying something that may not work. I think that's where progress can happen. If we take a risk, and I was so excited to have panelists and people that have taken a risk to put themselves out there, take a personal risk to put themselves out there, the risk of failure, the risk of it not succeeding. So if you take one thing away, please take that away. Think about what's the kind of one risk that you can take to have an impact, to implement plastic-free solutions in your organizations or just in your personal life. So thank you very much for joining, and enjoy the rest of Change Now. Bye-bye.